Jake Sullivan stood near the wall of the Grand Observation Hall, watching the crowd of aliens move past him. He felt out of place in his formal uniform. The other humans at the party seemed comfortable talking with ambassadors and politicians, but Jake was just a soldier. He preferred action to fancy words. The room was huge, with walls made of clear glass that showed the stars outside. Colorful lights from a nearby nebula painted everything in shades of purple and blue. Beings from dozens of different worlds filled the hall. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with their own light. Jake had seen many alien species during his time in the Galactic Coalition, but this many in one place still amazed him. Tonight was special. It marked 10 years since humanity joined the Coalition. 10 years of proving that humans could work alongside alien civilizations. 10 years of earning respect across the galaxy. Jake felt proud of that, even if he didn't enjoy fancy parties. His eyes moved across the room, always watching. That was his job. He was part of the security team for the human delegation. Old habits from his Marine days made him notice things others missed. Exit routes. Blind spots. People acting strange. The crowd suddenly grew quiet. Queen Lyrazeth had entered the hall. Jake had seen pictures of her before, but they didn't capture her presence. She stood 7 feet tall with skin that shimmered like crystal in the light. Her silver eyes swept across the room as she walked to the speaking platform. The royal guards surrounded her in a perfect formation, their blue armor gleaming. Something felt wrong. Jake couldn't put his finger on it at first. The guards looked professional. Their weapons were properly secured. Their formation was tight. But something in their positioning bothered him. Small details that his training made him notice. Gaps that shouldn't be there. Angles that didn't make sense for protection. He pushed the thought away. These were the elite royal guards of the Valkyrian Empire. They protected their queen every day. Who was he to question them? Maybe alien security protocols were different from human ones. The queen began to speak. Her voice was strong and clear, filling the entire hall without any need for amplification. She talked about unity and friendship between different species. She praised the Coalition for bringing peace to this part of the galaxy. She specifically mentioned humanity's contributions, calling humans brave and innovative. Jake felt a surge of pride. It meant something to hear an alien ruler speak so highly of his people. Humanity had worked hard for this recognition. They had fought in coalition battles, shared their technology, and proven their worth time and again. The queen raised her glass for a ceremonial toast. Everyone in the room did the same. Jake lifted his own glass, watching the crowd. That's when he saw it. One of the royal guards near the back made a subtle hand signal. Then another guard responded with a similar gesture. It was quick, almost invisible, but Jake's military training caught it. His heart rate increased. That wasn't a normal communication signal. His hand moved slowly toward his weapon. Around the room, more guards were making signals to each other. The pattern was clear now. They were coordinating something. Time seemed to slow down. Jake saw one of the guards, a tall Valkyrian with general's markings, nod his head once. In that instant, Jake knew exactly what was about to happen. His body moved before his mind finished the thought. The guards turned their weapons on the queen. Energy blasts lit up the room like deadly fireworks. Screams filled the air as ambassadors tried to run. Several aliens near the platform fell, struck down in the first seconds of the attack. The beautiful celebration had become a massacre in a heartbeat. Jake was already running. He crossed the distance to the queen faster than he thought possible. She stood frozen in shock, unable to believe her own guards were attacking her. A blast scorched the air where her head had been a moment before. Jake slammed into her, using his momentum to drive them both behind a thick ceremonial pillar. They hit the ground hard. The pillar exploded above them as energy weapons struck it repeatedly. Pieces of stone rained down on their heads. Jake covered the queen's body with his own, feeling the heat of the blast washing over them. "We need to move," Jake shouted over the noise. The queen stared at him, her silver eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Now!" He pulled her to her feet. Around them, chaos ruled. Some guards were shooting at the fleeing crowd while others advanced on their position. The general who had given the signal was shouting orders. His voice carried across the room, full of hatred and purpose. "The Empire will be purified," the general roared. "No more alien corruption. No more weakness." Jake drew his sidearm and fired 3 quick shots. He wasn't trying to kill anyone, just create confusion. The shots struck control panels near the guards, causing sparks and smoke to fill the air. It bought them a few precious seconds. He spotted a maintenance door half hidden behind decorative curtains. Most people wouldn't even know it was there, but Jake had studied the ship's layout as part of his security preparations. He always planned escape routes. It was habit, this way. He grabbed the Queen's hand and pulled her toward the door. Energy blasts followed them, burning holes in the expensive curtains. Jake kicked the door open and shoved the Queen through. He threw 2 small power cells from his belt back into the room, then sealed the door behind them. Seconds later, the power cells overloaded. The explosion wasn't big enough to hurt anyone seriously, but it would blind and disorient the guards chasing them. More importantly, it would make them cautious about following too quickly. Jake and the Queen ran through a narrow maintenance corridor. Emergency lights cast everything in red. The sounds of the attack grew distant behind them, but Jake knew they weren't safe. Not even close. The Queen was breathing hard, her shimmering skin now flickering between different colors. Jake guessed it was some kind of stress response. She looked at him with those silver eyes, and he saw the moment when shock began turning into understanding. "They betrayed me," she whispered. "My own guards I'm sorry," Jake said, still scanning their surroundings for threats. "But we need to keep moving." "Can you run?" She straightened her back, and Jake saw the Queen reassert herself. "Yes, where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't think to look." Jake led them deeper into the maintenance areas. Behind them, alarms began to wail throughout the ship. He heard announcements echoing through the corridors but couldn't make out the words. They reached a junction where several corridors met. Jake paused, trying to orient himself. The Queen touched his arm gently. "Thank you for saving my life. What is your name?" "Captain Jake Sullivan, Your Majesty." "Jake," she repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "I am in your debt." A sound echoed down one of the corridors. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving fast. Jake pulled the Queen into a side passage and pressed them both against the wall. A squad of guards ran past, weapons ready, searching for them. When they were gone, Jake risked a look at a wall display showing ship-wide announcements. His blood ran cold. The screen showed a message repeating in multiple languages. The Queen was dead, killed in a terrorist attack. The general had taken emergency command. All personnel were ordered to hunt down the terrorists responsible. The Queen saw it too. Her face went pale, her skin losing some of its shimmer. "They're telling everyone I'm dead. They're making me the enemy on my own ship." Jake checked his weapon. It was running low on charge. They had no supplies, no allies, and nowhere to go. The entire ship was hunting them, but giving up wasn't in his nature. Humans didn't quit when things got hard. That's what had earned them respect in the coalition. "Your Majesty," Jake said, his voice steady and calm, "we're going to get through this. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, I trust you, Jake Sullivan." "Good. Then follow me and stay quiet. We need to find a place to hide and figure out our next move." Jake led them deeper into the ship's dark corridors, away from the lights and the searching guards. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Ahead of them, only darkness and uncertainty waited, but at least they were still alive. And as long as they lived, they had a chance. The maintenance tunnel smelled of oil and metal. Dim emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. Jake moved carefully through the narrow space with Queen Lyrazeth right behind him. Every sound made them freeze, listening for guards who might have found their trail. They had been running and hiding for over an hour. Jake's uniform was torn and dirty. The Queen's elegant dress was ruined, streaked with grime and scorched in places. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. Jake stopped at a junction and pulled out a small device from his pocket. It was a basic scanner, part of his standard equipment. He studied the readings, trying to map their location within the massive ship. "Where are we going?" the Queen asked quietly. Her voice was steady now, the initial shock wearing off. "The shuttle bay," Jake said. "It's our best chance. If we can get to an escape pod or small shuttle, we can get off this ship. That's on the other side of the ship. Through dozens of security checkpoints. I know. But what choice do we have?" Jake looked at her seriously. "Unless you have a better idea?" The Queen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they glowed faintly in the darkness. "There are guards ahead. 3 of them. I can sense their emotions." Jake stared at her. "You can sense them? How far away?" "Perhaps 50 meters in that direction." She pointed down the left corridor. "My people have limited telepathic abilities." I can feel the presence of other Valkyrians nearby, especially their emotional states. These ones feel alert and aggressive. That's useful, Jake said, already thinking tactically. Can you tell when they move? Yes, they're searching systematically, moving slowly. Jake changed their route using the Queen's ability to avoid patrol groups. It was like having a radar that could see through walls. They moved through areas that normal security wouldn't monitor closely, places where maintenance crews worked on the ship's basic systems. As they walked, they passed a room with screens showing ship-wide broadcasts. Jake stopped to watch. The general from the observation hall appeared on the screen. His name, according to the display, was General Vector. The Queen planned to surrender our sovereignty, Vector said to the cameras. She would have made us slaves to alien interests. The Valkyrian Empire has been corrupted by outsiders for too long. We will restore our purity and strength. The Queen's hands clenched into fists. Lies, all lies. I was strengthening our position in the coalition, not weakening it. He's using fear, Jake said, making your people think the coalition is a threat. Classic propaganda. They kept moving. Jake found a storage room filled with maintenance equipment. He began gathering items, his mind working through possibilities. A length of cable, some power cells, a welding tool, basic components, but in the right hands they could become weapons or tools. What are you doing? The Queen asked. Making preparations. We might need these. Jake quickly assembled a crude but effective electromagnetic pulse device from the power cells and some wire. This won't hurt anyone, but it'll disable their weapons and armor for a few seconds if we need it. The Queen watched him work with fascination. Your people are remarkably resourceful. I've read reports about human adaptability, but seeing it firsthand is different. We had to be, Jake said, testing the device. Humanity fought a lot of wars before we reached the stars. We learned to make do with what we had. Use the enemy's advantages against them. Think outside the box. A noise from the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps were approaching along with voices. The Queen's eyes glowed again. More guards. A full squad this time. Jake quickly moved them behind a stack of storage containers. They crouched in the shadows, barely breathing. The guards entered the room, sweeping it with their weapons. Jake's hand hovered near his gun, ready to fight if they were discovered. Nothing here, one guard said. They probably went toward the lower decks. Keep looking, another replied. General Vector wants them found. Dead or alive, but preferably dead. The guards left, their footsteps fading. Jake waited a full minute before moving. That was close. They continued through the ship using maintenance shafts and service corridors that most crew members never saw. Jake's military training helped him navigate, while the Queen's telepathic sense kept them away from search parties. In a quiet section, they found a group of crew members hiding in an engineering bay. 5 Valkyrians looked up in shock when Jake and the Queen entered. For a moment, everyone froze. Then one of them, a young female, fell to her knees. Your Majesty, you're alive. Keep your voice down, Jake warned, checking the door behind them. The crew members gathered around the Queen, relief and joy on their faces. An older male spoke quickly. We knew it was a lie. The general's announcement didn't make sense. Many of us don't support this coup. How many loyal crew remain? The Queen asked. It's hard to say. The military hardliners support Vector. They've wanted to break away from the coalition for years, but many regular crew members are just scared and confused. They don't know what to believe. Jake's mind raced. Can you access the ship's systems from here? The older male nodded. Some systems, yes, but anything important has been locked down by Vector's people. What about communications? Can we send a message outside the ship? No, they've jammed all outgoing signals. As far as the coalition knows, everything here is normal. The Queen looked at Jake. We still need to reach the shuttle bay. Your Majesty, the young female said. The shuttle bay is heavily guarded. They're expecting you to try for it. It's a trap, Jake cursed under his breath. Of course it was a trap. Vector wasn't stupid. Are all the shuttles disabled? Every combat-worthy craft, yes, but... The older male hesitated. There's an old maintenance pod in Bay 7. Nobody uses it anymore. It barely works. But the guards might have overlooked it. Where's Bay 7? Jake asked. Lower levels. Near the waste processing systems. It's not a pleasant area. Doesn't need to be pleasant, Jake said. It just needs to get us off this ship. Can you guide us there? The crew members gave them directions and supplies. A basic medical kit, some food, and an engineer's toolkit. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Before they left, the young female touched the Queen's hand gently. "We believe in you, Your Majesty. Many of us do. Don't give up." The Queen smiled, her skin shimmering with color. "I won't. Stay safe, all of you." Jake led them toward the lower levels. The route took them through areas that smelled of chemicals and recycled air. It was hot and uncomfortable, but there were fewer guards down here. Most of the search focused on the upper decks where important facilities were located. They were almost to Bay 7 when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The Queen gasped, her hand going to her side. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "They found us. I can feel their emotions. Anger, excitement. They're coming from multiple directions." Jake heard the sound of running feet echoing through the corridors. They were out of time. He grabbed the Queen's hand and ran. Behind them, guards shouted orders. Energy blasts lit up the corridor, scorching the walls around them. They burst through a doorway into Bay 7. It was a small, dirty space filled with old equipment and spare parts. In the corner sat the maintenance pod. It looked ancient and barely functional, but it had an access hatch. "Get in," Jake shouted. The Queen climbed into the pod while Jake held the door. Guards appeared in the entrance. He threw his makeshift EMP device at them and ducked. The pulse knocked out their weapons and armor systems. They fell back, confused and temporarily blinded. Jake jumped into the pod and sealed the hatch. His hands flew over the controls. The pod systems were old and half the displays were broken, but it was responding. The engines whined as they powered up. Guards were recovering, raising backup weapons. Energy blasts hammered against the pod's hull. Jake activated the launch sequence. With a violent lurch, the pod shot out of the bay into open space. They tumbled through the darkness, alarms screaming inside the tiny craft. Jake fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their spin. Through the viewport, he saw the massive royal flagship behind them. Smaller ships were already launching to pursue them. "Can you outrun them?" the Queen asked, gripping her seat tightly. "In this piece of junk? Not a chance." Jake punched in coordinates for the nearest planet. "But I can be unpredictable." He sent the pod diving toward a nearby debris field, old wreckage from ancient space battles. The pursuing ships followed cautiously. Jake threaded the pod between twisted metal and broken hull plates, taking risks that no sane pilot would attempt. The pod shook violently as they scraped past a chunk of debris. Warning lights covered the control panel. One of the pursuing ships wasn't as lucky. It clipped a piece of wreckage and spun out of control. "We're losing power," Jake said as the engines began to fail. "Hold on." The planet rushed up to meet them. Jake aimed for an area that looked less populated, trying to control their descent. But the pod was failing fast. They hit the atmosphere hard, fire engulfing the viewport. The craft shook like it was tearing apart. They crashed into the ground with incredible force. Metal screamed. Systems exploded. Everything went dark. When Jake opened his eyes again, smoke filled the pod. His head throbbed with pain. Next to him, the Queen was unconscious but breathing. He forced the hatch open and pulled them both out of the wreckage. They had landed in some kind of industrial area. Old factories surrounded them. In the distance, he could see a city. They were on Velcara Prime, the Velcarian homeworld. They had escaped the ship only to crash behind enemy lines. Jake dragged the Queen into an abandoned factory building. Every muscle in his body screamed with pain from the crash. His left arm was bleeding, and he was pretty sure he had cracked a rib. But they were alive. That was what mattered. He laid the Queen down carefully on a relatively clean section of floor. She was still unconscious, a dark bruise forming on her forehead. Her crystalline skin had lost most of its shimmer, appearing dull and gray. Jake checked her pulse. It was steady, just weak. Using supplies from the medical kit they had gotten earlier, Jake treated her injury and his own. The factory was cold and smelled of rust and old machinery. Through broken windows, he could see the sky darkening. They had maybe an hour before it got completely dark. The Queen stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she looked confused. Then memory returned and she sat up quickly, wincing at the pain. "Easy," Jake said. "You hit your head pretty hard in the crash. Where are we?" "Velcara Prime. Your homeworld. We're in what looks like an old industrial district outside the capital." The Queen looked around at the ruined factory. "This is one of the old districts. These factories closed 20 years ago when we modernized production. Few people come here anymore." "Good. That gives us some time to plan." Jake moved to a window and looked out carefully. In the distance, he could see lights from the city. Closer, there were signs of activity. Search parties, probably. They'll be looking for the crash site, the Queen said, standing up slowly. We should move before they find us. Where can we go? Is there anyone we can trust? The Queen thought for a moment. My sister, Princess Kiravel. She would never support this coup, but I don't know if she's safe or even alive. A sound outside made them both freeze. Voices. Jake moved to another window and peeked out. A patrol was searching the area, moving between buildings. They were thorough, checking every structure. We need to go. Now. Jake helped the Queen to her feet. They moved quietly through the factory, heading for a back exit. Outside, darkness was falling fast. Jake used it as cover, keeping them in shadows as they moved away from the patrol. They traveled through the abandoned district for hours. The Queen's injury slowed them down, but she didn't complain. Jake was impressed by her strength. Most people would have given up by now, but she kept moving forward. As they passed a building with working power, they saw a large screen broadcasting news. Jake stopped to watch. General Vector appeared on the screen, looking stern and official. The terrorist attack has been contained, Vector said. The Queen gave her life defending the Empire. Her death will not be in vain. I have assumed temporary leadership until stability is restored. All coalition personnel have been detained for their own safety. Any citizen who aids terrorists will be considered an enemy of the state. The Queen's fists clenched. He's taken control of everything. My people believe I'm dead. Then we need to show them you're alive, Jake said. But first we need help. Any idea how to contact your sister? If she's organizing resistance, she would use the old underground networks. From the days before we joined the coalition, when my father fought the warlords. The Queen looked toward the city. There are certain places she might be. Safe houses that only the royal family knows about. Can we reach one? The nearest is in the merchant district, but... She looked down at her ruined dress. I can't walk through the city looking like this. Everyone will recognize me. Jake understood the problem. The Queen was famous, her face known to every citizen. And he was human, which made him stand out even more. They needed disguises. They found what they needed in an old warehouse. Worker clothing, dirty and worn but functional. The Queen changed behind some crates, emerging in simple pants and a hooded jacket that hid her distinctive features. Jake found a similar outfit that covered his human appearance. It wouldn't hold up to close inspection, but from a distance they might blend in. As they approached the city, they joined groups of workers heading home from late shifts. The Queen kept her head down and Jake stayed close to her. They passed several checkpoints where soldiers were scanning crowds. Jake's heart pounded each time, but the disguises held. The merchant district was busy even at night. Street vendors sold food and goods. People moved between shops and restaurants. It was almost normal, except for the extra soldiers on every corner and the propaganda posters showing Vector as the Empire's protector. The Queen led them to a small shop that sold electronic parts. To anyone else it looked ordinary. But she knew better. She made a specific signal at the door, tapping out a pattern that Jake recognized as some kind of code. After a long moment, the door opened. An older Valkyrian male peered out, his eyes widening when he saw the Queen's face beneath her hood. Your Majesty, he whispered. Quickly inside, they entered the shop. The male locked the door behind them and led them through to a back room. He touched a hidden panel revealing stairs leading down. They descended into a basement that was much larger than the shop above. Computers and communication equipment filled the space. And there were people, dozens of them, all armed and watching the newcomers with surprise. A female Valkyrian stood from a command station. She was younger than the Queen, but their features were similar. This had to be Princess Kiravel. Sister, the Queen said, pulling back her hood. Kiravel stared for a moment. Then she rushed forward and embraced the Queen tightly. We saw your broadcast death. I knew it was a lie. I knew you were alive. I had help. The Queen gestured to Jake. This is Captain Jake Sullivan. He saved my life. Kiravel looked at Jake with respect. A human, of course. Your people have always been full of surprises. She turned to her people. Everyone, the Queen lives. Spread the word through our network. This changes everything. The resistance members moved quickly, sending messages through encrypted channels. Kiravel led Jake and the Queen to a planning table covered with maps and tactical displays. What's the situation? The Queen asked. Bad, Kiravel said honestly. Vectar has most of the military leadership. They've been planning this for months. Coalition personnel are being held at the embassy. He's using them as hostages to prevent coalition intervention. Jake felt a surge of anger. His fellow humans were prisoners. How many hostages? 32. Including your Lieutenant Megan Torres. Jake knew Megan, they had worked together before. She was smart and capable, but she was also trapped with no way out. What about military forces? The Queen asked. How many units remain loyal? It's hard to say. Many are confused. Vectar controls the communication networks. He's been feeding propaganda constantly, but I believe many would turn back to you if they knew you were alive. Then we need to broadcast the truth, the Queen said. Kiravel nodded. There's a main communication center in the Royal Palace. If we could access it, we could override all of Vectar's broadcasts and reach the entire Empire. The palace will be heavily guarded, Jake said, studying the maps. Extremely. But you got off a guarded flagship. You crashed on a hostile planet. You made it here through checkpoints and patrols. Kiravel looked at him seriously. Can you do the impossible one more time? Jake looked at the palace layout on the display. It was a fortress. Multiple defensive layers, thousands of soldiers, advanced security systems. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out alive would be a miracle. But he had done impossible things before. That's what humans were good at, finding ways when there seemed to be none. I have an idea, Jake said slowly. It's risky, really risky, but it might work. He began explaining his plan, using the old palace service tunnels that dated back centuries, moving during the guard shift changes, creating diversions in multiple locations to split enemy forces. The Queen could use her knowledge of the palace layout. Kiravel's people would provide support and extraction. It's insane, Kiravel said when he finished. Yes, Jake agreed. But do we have a better option? The room was quiet. Then the Queen spoke. We do this. Tonight. The longer we wait, the more time Vectar has to consolidate power. Kiravel gave orders to her people. They prepared equipment and weapons. Jake checked his gear, making sure everything was ready. The Queen sat next to him, looking thoughtful. Jake, she said quietly, thank you for everything you've done. You could have run when the attack started. You could have saved yourself, but you chose to help me instead. It wasn't really a choice, Jake said. It was the right thing to do. Your people's sense of honor impresses me. The coalition is stronger because humanity joined it. I hope I can tell them that myself someday. You will, Jake said with confidence he didn't entirely feel. We're going to win this. When everything was ready, they moved out. Kiravel's people had vehicles waiting in hidden garages. They drove through the city in small groups, avoiding main roads and checkpoints. The royal palace loomed above the city, lit up like a beacon. It had stood for 1,000 years, home to generations of Valkyrian rulers. Now it was occupied by traitors. But Jake and the Queen were going to take it back. They entered through an old maintenance tunnel that the Queen remembered from her childhood. The passage was narrow and dark, barely used in decades. It smelled of damp stone and age, but it led directly into the palace's lower levels. Jake moved carefully, checking for sensors or alarms. The tunnel seemed clear. They climbed upward through forgotten passages, following the Queen's memory of the palace layout. Around them, they could hear sounds of the palace above, footsteps, voices, the normal activity of a massive complex. They were close to the communication center when the Queen suddenly gasped. Her hand went to her head, eyes closing in pain. What's wrong? Jake whispered. I sense many minds, angry, focused. Her eyes opened, filled with alarm. It's a trap. They're waiting for us. Before Jake could react, doors burst open at both ends of the corridor. Soldiers poured in, weapons raised, and leading them was General Vectar himself, a cruel smile on his face. Your Majesty, Vectar said mockingly, I knew you would come here eventually. Your telepathic signature is quite distinctive. We've been tracking you since you landed. Jake raised his weapon, but they were surrounded. Dozens of guns pointed at them. The Queen stood tall, refusing to show fear. You used us as bait, Jake realized, to draw out the resistance. Very clever, human. Yes, we've been rounding up resistance cells all night. You led us right to them. Vectar gestured to his soldiers. Take the human. Kill the Queen. Everything happened at once. Jake threw a smoke grenade and fired blindly. The Queen used her telepathy to sense where guards were and attacked them with surprising combat skill. They fought with everything they had, but there were too many. A blast knocked Jake backward. He saw the Queen surrounded, fighting desperately. Then soldiers grabbed him, pulling him away. He struggled, but something hit his head hard. The world went dark. The last thing he saw was the Queen's face, torn between completing the mission and saving him. Jake woke up in a cell. His head throbbed with pain and his wrists were bound with energy restraints. The room was small and cold, with metal walls and a single harsh light overhead. He tried to move, but his body protested. They had beaten him while he was unconscious. The door opened. General Vector entered, looking pleased with himself. 2 guards stood behind him, weapons ready. "The human is awake," Vector said. "Good, we have much to discuss." Jake said nothing. He had been trained for interrogation. The first rule was to stay quiet and assess the situation. "Your people are problematic," Vector continued, pacing the cell. "Always interfering. Always thinking you know best. You've been in the coalition for barely a decade, yet you act like you own the galaxy. Is that what this is about?" Jake asked. "You're jealous of humanity." Vector struck him hard across the face. "This is about preserving Valkyrian strength. The Queen would have us become servants to lesser species. She welcomed aliens into our empire. She shared our technology. She weakened us." Jake tasted blood but smiled anyway. "You're afraid? That's what this is really about. You're afraid that working with others shows your own weakness." Another blow. Then another. Jake endured it, keeping his face blank. Vector was getting angry, which meant he was making mistakes. "Angry people weren't careful. Tell me about coalition military positions," Vector demanded. "I know you have access to classified information. I'm just a captain. I don't know anything useful." "Lies. Tell me about Earth's defenses, about your military technology." Jake laughed, which earned him another beating, but he had learned something important. Vector planned to attack coalition worlds. This wasn't just about the Valkyrian Empire. It was the start of a war. The interrogation continued for hours. They tried threats. They tried pain. Jake told them nothing useful. Instead, he talked constantly, asking questions, making observations. He planted seeds of doubt in the guards' minds, made them think about what they were doing. Not all of them seemed completely convinced by Vector's ideology. Finally, Vector gave up for the day. "We have time. You'll break eventually. Everyone does." He left the cell, taking the guards with him. Jake waited until their footsteps faded. Then he got to work. The energy restraints on his wrists were strong, but they had a weakness. All such devices did. During the interrogation, he had carefully moved his hands, studying how the restraints responded. Now he knew their pattern. He had hidden a small piece of metal from his uniform button during the capture. It was tiny, barely useful for anything. But Jake had learned long ago that you could do a lot with very little if you were creative. It took an hour of careful work, but he managed to short-circuit the restraints. They sparked and went dead. His hands were free. Jake rubbed his sore wrists and looked around the cell carefully. The walls were solid metal. The door was locked electronically, but there was a ventilation grate near the ceiling. He stood on the bench that served as his bed and examined the grate. It was secured with screws, but they were old and corroded. Using the piece of metal, he worked them loose one by one. The process was slow and his arms ached, but eventually the grate came free. The ventilation shaft was narrow, but Jake squeezed through. He had studied palace layouts with the resistance. If he was where he thought he was, this shaft would connect to the main system. From there, he could reach other areas of the palace. Meanwhile, in the resistance base, the Queen faced a difficult decision. Kiravel and the other resistance members argued about what to do next. "We should strike now," one of them said. "Attack Vector's forces while they're divided." "That's suicide," another argued. "They have superior numbers and equipment. We need to wait for a better opportunity." The Queen listened to them debate, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Jake, imprisoned because he had helped her. He had saved her life multiple times. He had asked for nothing in return, and now he was suffering because of choices she had made. "Sister," Kiravel said gently, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we should rescue Jake," the Queen said. "We can't leave him there. The palace is a fortress. A rescue mission would reveal our location and waste resources we can't afford to lose." "Jake wouldn't leave us behind," the Queen said firmly. I won't abandon him. What would he want you to do? Kiravel asked. If he were here, what would he say? The Queen knew the answer. Jake would tell her to complete the mission, to focus on the bigger picture, to broadcast the truth and rally loyal forces. He would accept his own sacrifice if it meant stopping Vectar. But the Queen had learned something from Jake during their time together. Sometimes the logical choice wasn't the right choice. Sometimes you had to follow your heart. That's what made humans special. They believed in the value of individual lives, not just strategic advantages. We do both, the Queen said. We proceed with the communication center plan, but we also create a diversion that gives Jake a chance to escape if he can. That's risky, Kiravel said, but she was smiling. It's also very human of you. I think Jake is rubbing off on you. They made new plans quickly. A small team would infiltrate the palace using the routes Jake had identified. They would plant explosives and set them to detonate in sequence, creating chaos. During the confusion, the Queen would reach the communication center, and if Jake was capable of escaping, the diversions would give him an opportunity. In the ventilation shaft, Jake had been crawling for what felt like hours. His body was exhausted and every movement caused pain, but he kept going. He reached a junction where he could see down into a corridor below. Guards were stationed at regular intervals. Too many to fight directly. He continued through the shaft, searching for a better route. The palace was massive and the ventilation system was like a maze. But Jake had a good sense of direction. He was making his way toward where he thought the communication center might be. That's when he heard the first explosion. Distant but powerful. Alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Jake smiled. Someone was creating a diversion. It had to be the resistance, which meant the Queen was making her move. More explosions followed. Jake could hear guards running through the corridors below, shouting orders. The palace was in chaos. He used the confusion to move faster, not worrying about noise anymore. He found a grate that overlooked a weapons storage room. It was empty, the guards having left to respond to the explosions. Jake dropped down and equipped himself with whatever he could find. A standard energy rifle, some grenades, body armor that didn't quite fit but was better than nothing. Now armed, Jake moved through the palace with purpose. He took out isolated guards when necessary, using quick and quiet methods. He avoided larger groups, staying to side passages and maintenance areas. The Queen was also moving through the palace, using routes that only she knew. Kiravel's people had triggered the diversions perfectly. The palace security was stretched thin, responding to multiple threats at once. It was working. She reached the communication center's outer corridor. 2 guards stood at the entrance. The Queen used her telepathy to sense their emotional state. They were nervous and distracted. She stepped out of hiding, moving with royal authority. You two report to Sector 7 immediately, she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. There's been a breach. The guards hesitated, confused. Then recognition dawned. You're supposed to be dead. The Queen struck before they could raise their weapons. Her royal combat training proved effective. She moved with grace and power, disabling both guards in seconds. She took their access cards and entered the communication center. The room was full of equipment for broadcasting across the Empire. The Queen sat at the main console and began working quickly. She had learned these systems as part of her royal education. Within minutes, she had overridden the security protocols and was ready to broadcast. But more guards were coming. She could sense them approaching fast. She activated the broadcast anyway, knowing she might only have seconds. People of the Valkyrian Empire, she began, her image appearing on screens across the planet and beyond. I am alive. General Vectar lied about my death. He and his conspirators have staged a coup based on fear and hatred. Do not believe his propaganda about the coalition or about humanity. The door exploded inward. Vectar entered with a squad of elite soldiers. You're too late, he snarled. Even if they see you alive, it changes nothing. My forces control all strategic positions. Maybe, the Queen said, still broadcasting. But truth has power. My people will see what you really are. Vectar raised his weapon. Goodbye, Your Majesty. A blast struck Vectar from the side, knocking him down. Jake appeared in the doorway, his stolen rifle smoking. I don't think so. The room erupted into chaos. Jake and the Queen fought back-to-back against Vectar's soldiers. The broadcast continued, showing the entire Empire what was happening, showing a human and their Queen fighting together against traitors. Jake took down 3 soldiers, but more kept coming. A blast caught him in the side. He fell, pain exploding through his body. The Queen screamed his name. Vectar rose, laughing despite his injuries. Touching, Vectar said. But pointless. Then the walls exploded. Resistance fighters poured in, led by Kiravel. Behind them came soldiers in Valkyrian military uniforms. But these ones were firing on Vectar's forces. The broadcast had worked. Loyal military units had seen the truth and turned against the coup. The battle was short but intense. Vectar's soldiers were overwhelmed. The general himself tried to escape in the confusion. He fought his way to a side exit, leaving his own people behind. The Queen had a choice. Chase Vectar and end this once and for all, or stay with Jake, who was bleeding badly on the floor. She looked at the fleeing general. Then she looked at Jake. "Let him go," she said to her soldiers. "Help me save this man's life." Medical teams rushed in. The Queen knelt beside Jake, holding his hand as they worked on him. His eyes were barely open, but he managed a weak smile. "Did we win?" he whispered. "Yes," the Queen said, tears running down her face. "We won. Now stay with me." "That's an order." "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said. Then he closed his eyes. The medical team worked frantically. Around them, loyal forces were securing the palace. Across the Empire, military units were standing down as they saw the truth of what had happened. The coup was collapsing, but Jake's life hung in the balance. The Queen refused to leave his side. She held his hand tightly, willing him to survive. He had saved her so many times. Now all she could do was pray that the medical team could save him. 2 weeks later, Jake opened his eyes to a white ceiling. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then memory returned. The palace. The fight. Getting shot. He tried to sit up, but his body protested with pain. "Easy," a familiar voice said. The Queen appeared beside his bed, her face filled with relief. "You've been unconscious for 12 days. The doctor said it was close, but you're going to be fine." Jake looked around. He was in a medical facility, but it was luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city outside. Advanced medical equipment surrounded his bed. This wasn't a normal hospital, this was the Royal Medical Center. "What happened?" His voice was rough from disuse. The Queen smiled. "We won." The broadcast reached the entire empire. Once people saw the truth, most of the military refused to follow Vectar. The coup collapsed within hours. Coalition forces arrived to help secure the peace. "You did it, Jake. We did it together." "Vectar?" Her expression darkened. "He escaped. We're still searching for him, but his forces have been defeated. The threat is over for now." Jake nodded, then winced at the pain. "The hostages? The coalition personnel?" "All released safely. Lieutenant Megan Torres sends her regards. She said she always knew you were too stubborn to die." That made Jake smile despite everything. Megan had always given him a hard time. It was good to know she was safe. The Queen sat down in the chair beside his bed. "I stayed with you every day. I couldn't leave until I knew you would survive. You saved my life so many times. I owed you that much." "You didn't owe me anything," Jake said. "I was just doing the right thing." "That's what makes you remarkable," she said softly. "You risk everything without expecting anything in return. That's very human of you." Over the next few days, Jake recovered quickly with the help of advanced Valkyrian medical technology. The wounds that would have killed him on Earth were healing at an incredible rate. He could walk within 3 days, though he tired easily. Commander Kyle Harrison visited him on the 4th day. The older officer looked tired but relieved. "You gave us quite a scare, Captain. When we heard what happened, the entire fleet was ready to come fight for you. Sorry to worry everyone, sir." "Don't be sorry. You did something incredible. You stopped a coup, saved the Queen, and strengthened the coalition all at once. Earth is proud of you. The entire coalition is proud of you." Lieutenant Megan Torres came with him, grinning widely. "You always have to be the hero, don't you? Can't just sit quietly at a diplomatic party like a normal person?" "Not really my style," Jake admitted. They talked for hours, catching up on everything that had happened. The coalition was sending investigators to learn how deep the conspiracy ran. Several other species had similar groups who opposed integration, but the failed coup had actually strengthened support for the coalition. People saw how humans and aliens could work together to overcome threats. A week after waking, Jake was well enough to attend a formal ceremony at the royal palace. The throne room had been repaired and cleaned. Hundreds of people filled the space, representing dozens of species from across the coalition. Queen Lyrazeth stood on the raised platform looking every bit the ruler she was born to be. Her crystalline skin shimmered with pride and joy. Next to her stood Princess Kiravel and other members of the royal family. "Captain Jake Sullivan," the Queen announced, her voice carrying across the room. "Step forward." Jake walked to the platform, trying not to show how nervous he felt. He was just a soldier. He didn't belong in places like this. But he climbed the steps and stood before the Queen. "You saved my life," the Queen said. "Not once, but many times. You protected me when my own guards betrayed me. You fought beside me when we had nothing but hope. You showed courage, loyalty, and honor that inspired an entire empire. Today, I wish to honor you as no human has been honored before." She picked up a medal from a cushion held by an attendant. It was beautiful, made of crystal and metal that seemed to glow with inner light. "This is the Star of Velkara, the highest civilian honor our empire can bestow. It has been given only 12 times in our history. You are the first non-Velkarian to receive it." She placed the medal around Jake's neck. The crowd erupted in applause. Jake felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he managed to say. "But I was just doing my job." "It was far more than a job," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "You became my friend. That's worth more than any medal." After the ceremony, there was a reception. Jake found himself surrounded by ambassadors and officials from dozens of worlds. They all wanted to meet the human who had saved the Queen. He answered their questions politely but felt overwhelmed. The Queen rescued him, taking his arm and leading him to a quieter balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. "Too much attention?" she asked with amusement. "I prefer fighting to talking," Jake admitted. "Give me a mission over a party any day." "I have a mission for you if you're interested." He looked at her curiously. "What kind of mission?" "I want you to become my official liaison to humanity, a position that would make you an advisor to both the Velkarian throne and the Coalition Council. You would help build stronger ties between our peoples, prevent misunderstandings, work to make sure nothing like this coup ever happens again." Jake thought about it. It meant giving up his military career, becoming a diplomat instead of a soldier. It would be challenging in completely different ways, but it would also be important work. And he trusted the Queen. They had been through too much together for him to turn her down now. "I accept," he said, "on one condition. Name it." "If there's ever another crisis like this, you let me help." "No matter what my official title is," the Queen smiled. "Deal. Though I hope there won't be another crisis. One was more than enough." A few days later, Princess Kiravel brought troubling news. Her intelligence network had tracked General Vektar to a lawless sector of space. He was gathering forces, connecting with other groups who opposed the coalition. "He's not giving up," Kiravel said at the meeting. "He believes he can still win. He's trying to build an alliance of isolationists from multiple species." "Then we need to stop him," the Queen said firmly, "not just for the Velkarian Empire, but for the entire coalition." "The coalition is forming a special task force," Commander Harrison said. He had joined the meeting via communication link, dedicated to hunting down Vektar and the remaining conspirators. "They're asking for volunteers," Jake spoke up immediately. "I volunteer." The Queen looked at him. "Are you sure? You just got this new position, and you're still recovering." "I'm sure. Vektar is still out there because we chose to save me instead of capturing him. I need to help finish this." "Then I'm coming too," the Queen said. Several people in the room started to protest, but she held up her hand. "This conspiracy targeted me personally. I have every right to help bring the traitors to justice. Besides, Jake and I work well together. We proved that. It took several days of planning, but eventually it was decided. Jake would lead a team with members from multiple species. The Queen would coordinate from a command ship, using her authority to gain access to places the task force couldn't reach alone." Before he left, Jake took some time to visit Earth. He wanted to see his family, to let them know he was okay. His parents lived in a small town, far from the spaceports and cities. They were simple people who had never expected their son to become involved in galactic politics. His mother cried when she saw him. His father gripped his hand tightly. They had seen the news coverage, knew what he had done, but they were just happy he was alive. "I'm proud of you, son," his father said. "You did good. You represented humanity well." "I just did what I had to do," Jake said. "That's what being human is all about," his mother said. "Doing what needs to be done even when it's hard, even when it's scary." Jake spent a week on Earth reconnecting with the world that had raised him, but he felt the pull of space. There was work to be done. The Coalition needed him. The Queen needed him. On his last day home, he stood in his old bedroom looking at pictures from his childhood. So much had changed. He had gone from a simple Marine to someone who had saved a queen and helped prevent a war. It felt surreal. His mother found him there. "Are you ready to go back?" "Yes," Jake said. "There's still work to do. Vectar is out there and he won't stop until he's captured or stopped." "Then you go stop him," she said, hugging him tightly. "But promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." When he returned to space, a ceremony was waiting at Coalition headquarters. It was smaller than the one on Velcara Prime, but somehow more meaningful. Representatives from Earth and dozens of other worlds gathered to formally recognize the bonds that had been strengthened through the crisis. Ambassador Chen Wei spoke for humanity. "What Captain Sullivan did shows the best of what humans can be. Brave, loyal, resourceful. We are honored to be part of this coalition, and we will continue to fight for its ideals." Queen Lyrazeth spoke for the Velcarian Empire. "The conspiracy tried to divide us with fear and lies. But one human soldier showed us the truth. That working together makes us stronger. That differences between species don't matter when we share common values. Captain Sullivan is now a citizen of two worlds, a bridge between humanity and the Velcarian Empire. He represents the future we are building together." After the ceremony, Jake and the Queen stood together on the observation deck of the Coalition flagship. It was the same ship where the attack had happened, now repaired and restored, the same place where everything had started. "Feels like a lifetime ago," Jake said, looking out at the stars. "It was only a month," the Queen said, "but so much has changed." "You changed me, Jake. You showed me what true courage looks like, what it means to never give up, even when everything seems hopeless." "You changed me too," Jake said. "I used to think strength meant doing everything alone. You taught me that asking for help, trusting others, isn't weakness. It's wisdom." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Out there somewhere was General Vectar, gathering forces for another attempt. But Jake wasn't worried. They had beaten him once. They would beat him again, because they had something Vectar would never understand. They had friendship. They had trust. They had unity across species lines, and that was stronger than any weapon. "Ready for the next adventure?" the Queen asked. Jake smiled. "Always. Let's go hunting." The task force ship was waiting for them, a crew of the best soldiers and specialists from multiple species, all dedicated to finishing what Jake and the Queen had started, to protecting the Coalition and making sure the conspiracy was completely destroyed. As they boarded the ship, Jake felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something more, a symbol of what the Coalition could be, a proof that different species could work together, could become friends, could build something better than what came before. The ship's engines powered up. Through the viewport, Jake could see Earth in the distance, a blue and green jewel in the darkness. His home. But he had another home now, too, aboard this ship with people from across the galaxy. The Queen stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Not as a ruler to a subject, but as a friend to a friend. They had saved each other's lives. They had stopped a coup. They had changed the course of history. And now they would finish the job. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying them toward new adventures and new challenges. Behind them, the Coalition grew stronger. Ahead of them, the hunt for General Vectar awaited, but whatever came next, Jake knew one thing for certain. They would face it together. Human and alien, soldier and queen, friends who had proven that the galaxy was better when its people stood united. That was the real message of their story. That was what would echo across the stars for generations to come. Unity was strength. Friendship was power. And sometimes one brave person doing the right thing could change everything.